Hey, welcome back to another exciting episode of Be Different Podcast. Guys, sijui mtaanza kunilipa lini. I bring for you very interesting people and very interesting guests. My name is Nekesa Ochieng as usual, and you guys, now you should start subscribing to this channel. Sindio. So, with me, there's a very interesting story behind how we met and where we are now. I'll leave my guests to tell you that story, but she's a children's author. You guys know I've done a book review before, so you know how excited I am about reading and about books. This is called Arawelo. This is called A Boy Named Salah. And this is called My Brother with a Colourful Brain. The most interesting thing that made us connect, or rather that made me, be so interested in our author today and in our guest. So welcome my guest. Let me allow her to introduce herself, then we'll talk more. Welcome.
Thank you so much, Nekesa. My name is Sahara Abdi. I am a storyteller, a writer, and an author. I was inspired to write for kids, I will say for two reasons. One being I grew up in a home of books. I used to love to read, and I used to read, and I used to, I have never found storybooks that I could read through and see myself or see anything that was familiar to me, whether it's my surrounding, whether it's my where I lived, the town I lived in, never. Except for the curriculum textbooks that will have the names like Abdi or Fatuma feature, and it used to make me so excited. I remember whenever I come across the name, I used to even underline it and go back to that page. At that time I didn't know why I used to do that and what it even meant, but now that I'm this person who's on this field, I do understand what it meant for me and what it means for any child to read a book and see something they can relate with. The second reason as to why I write for kids is because of my daughter. She loves stories equally as her mother, and we'll sit down and tell stories at home. I'll tell her stories that I grew up around. I'll read books to her, and I realized the same books that I read are the same books that are still in the market. Nothing for her to read and relate with, nothing for her to, there's nothing I could tell, this is where I was born, or maybe this is where, I grew up in a story, in a book. So that gave me the challenge of, I actually have to sit down and write those books, because maybe no one will ever do it if I don't. So that's how I found myself on this path of storytelling and writing for kids. Yeah.
So interesting. What has inspired short stories of each before we get to the one that I'm most interested in?
So this is called Arawelo. Arawelo is a Somali legendary queen in the Somali story around the 15th century. That is what I got from the records that I read. But growing up, Arawelo has not just growing up to date, that's the story around her. She was a woman activist, somebody who was fighting for women liberation and creating movements of women in the 15th century in a patriarchal community. So you can imagine just how powerful she was. And coming down to growing up and even to date, her name has been, made into a kind of a monster-like. We will be told, don't be like Arawelo. If a girl is outspoken, if a girl is, able to voice her voice out, she'll be told, Arawelo, shut up. I think I don't know whether it's just the patriarchy that was in place that has decided to ruin the name or something. And knowing her story, for a woman who is a mother and has a daughter, I thought the best thing to do was, create a character that is outspoken and that is, that knows herself, so confident in herself and strong, so that to make the name to be what it was meant to be, grateful and not something to be shut down. So that's why I named the girl in this story, who is a 10-year-old girl, Arawelo. And
I have so many questions. Gosh, Sahara. I have so many questions. Of course, I want to ask, was that controversial from how you were brought up and all that? What made you want to change the narrative from Arawelo, from the negative to
Because I know Arawelo is, I will say, is everything every girl needs to look up to. A woman who is, you know, like empowered, a woman who is strong, a woman who knows her roots, a woman who is confident in her story, you know, like, so that is the kind of woman I want my daughter to look up to grow up admiring. And that's why I had to change the narrative so that it's not, you know, like the negative connotation. And she doesn't deserve that for sure. It's somebody who has done so much for our community, and a community that has not just her. I think we, people say we are a patriarchal community, but this is also one of the things I always say. I think we are more of matriarchal compared to, you know, like the number of women in history, in our history, if you go back, you know, just how strong they were, and especially in those centuries, and how much the community rode on their backs. I tell you, I think we need to smash that patriarchy word. And
I've heard you.
Yes. Okay. So this is a boy named Salah also. There's a story I think so many Kenyans know. I don't know whether you could recall. Back in 2017, a teacher, they were on a bus, and the bus was attacked by terrorists. And they segregated them into two sections, so non-locals and locals. And when they were about to shoot the non-locals, this teacher rose from where he was sitting and asked them, you know, like, who are you to do God's work? Like, just why exactly are you killing people? And you know, this is not what God has commanded. This is not what Islam is all on about. You know, like, so in the midst of that uproar and fight, and him trying to tell them that, you know, you're on the wrong, he was shot. Fortunately or unfortunately, he didn't die immediately. He was airlifted, brought to Kenyatta Hospital, and that's where he passed on. The Prime Minister at that time, Raila Odinga, and even the President, I think, visited him at the hospital, even went down to his home and visited him. A movie was made out of his story, but it was done by non-locals, you know, like white people. And so I thought, this is somebody known to me from, of course not my childhood, but we come from the same village. I know him, I know all he stood for, I know how great of a teacher he was. And so I thought, if I don't do something for his name, again, no one else will. So that's how I created this story of a boy named Salah. Salah was his name, just so that, you know, his name doesn't get to be washed away, you know, like through history, doesn't get lost. Because something in a book is something that's forever going to be here. So it is to honor. In fact, even the dedication, I've written, I know not so many people know, and I've had people call to ask me, who's that teacher Salah, you know, out of curiosity. So the book is in honor of the life and legacy of teacher Salah, and for his loving memory.
You said same village. Which village is this?
It's in Mandera North. It's called Ramu, and that is where the story is set as well. And the main character in the story, that is Salah, ends up saving a life of somebody using a traditional medicine. So that was, you know, like my way of just saying thank you for his legacy and for the act of courage he died for.
I like that. Then we go to the star of the show, the most current.
My brother with the colorful brain. So this comes so close home. I am a mother of a son who is a neurodivergent. It's been a journey, you know, like coming to terms with it and accepting it, and just saying, this is my child and I need to voice this out to make, you know, like, to share my story. Just at first when I shared my story, that was just it. I did not intend to be any hero or intend to have anyone come into, you know, like, to do advocacy or whatever it was. It was just me accepting that this is my journey and this is my story and this is my child. So when you have a neurodivergent child, and any mother perhaps out there who's going to listen to this will attest to this, you always visit in the hospital. So many hospital visits. So in the many hospital visits, my daughter, who's now 6, was tagging along, you know, like going to the hospital with us, and she will always ask me, Mommy, what is wrong with my brother? you know, and she will always compare him with the other kids because where we live, they're always kids. So she will say, Mommy, you know, daughter X and Y is walking. Why is my son, why is my brother not walking? Why is he quiet? Why is he staring at the wall? So all those questions of, Mommy, what is wrong with my brother made me to come up with this story and share in the hope that it's going to shed some light around neurodivergent issues and basically just to open up the conversation, just to have mothers come out and share their experiences so that we together can journey through. Yeah.
I really like that. So we can put a pause, rewind to how we met. I really like that. And we are going to talk about more, of course, more about the book.
Yeah, sure.
So we are at the museum. We've all taken our kids to just, you know, have fun randomly, and then the kids met, connected, started playing and singing together.
I remember at first, like you went by me and I didn't even say hi, and until the kids warmed up to each other, and when they started playing together is when we started having conversation.
Yeah. And you were just like, I want to take a photo of the kids. And I was like, okay, I've already taken a video. I had already taken a whole video of them singing. And it was such a nice moment. And you told me what you were going to do after. You told me you were going to read for kids. And I felt terrible because I'd already, like, I wanted to leave and it was about to rain and I already called a cab. So imagine in that brief moment, I asked you for your contacts. What happened? I asked you for your number. Or something. Like, we exchanged contacts and I was like, I have to come and hear you reading for kids. That struck me. Yeah. So after that, what you don't know, Sahara, is that I don't know whether it was before or after, but I was in the middle of responding to some proposal for women in the media, content creators. They wanted something. And I don't know what struck me about motherhood and disability or persons living with disability. So I started writing from that angle, that there are mothers who have children with disability and they do not necessarily talk about it. They hide them because of, you know, the society and all that and all that. So I wrote something, bounced it off, you know, there are a few people, and then we really took up that angle of persons living with disability. I recently had a guest, our disability liaison officer for you know, students and staff living with disability, and she really painted a picture for us. So later on, I don't know whether we became Facebook friends or you told me about you, Hanad. I don't know how it happened, but then you told me and I told you have to come, and you actually sent me a link to your blog. I've remembered, and you told me, if you have a moment, kindly read this. And I read the story and I was so overwhelmed, and I told you have to come to Be Different podcast just to share your story. So that's how we met, guys. Woohoo! And we were just saying in the lift how it was so amazing, right?
It really was.
Like, in that day you met so many people, but this is the relationship that, you know, took wings. So I went for the launch last week. It was very recent, the launch of the book. I have read the book and I liked that it was from the angle of the firstborn child, and talking about the sibling. And there's so many issues, of course, that came out from the book, and also you're really offering guidance for parents who have children living with disability, and I really like that. It's a guide. But then after you read the story, it's a guide for us parents to actually read. So tell us your story now, from how I like that you had books before this happened, because, you know, motherhood, it's a journey. When you wrote the first two, where were you? And then when you wrote the third one, where were you?
Actually, the first two books were both done in 2020.
Oh, wow.
Yeah. Maybe to just rewind back to how I refound, I will say, maybe if there's any word as such in the English, as to how I finally found my way back to writing. I always loved stories and I always loved writing. From as young as I can remember, when I was in primary school, at around class 6 or class 5, I used to read I remember, I actually remember I read Man of the People,
Yeah.
you know, The River and the Source,
Yeah.
and I was there quoting, a home without a daughter is like a spring without a source in my composition.
Yeah.
All because I was surrounded by books. We used to live with my uncles who were going to high school, and I will borrow the books and read. I remember in class 7, I was reading this novel, what is it called, by John Kriamiti, My Life with a Criminal, My Life in a Crime, you know, like, and even when the teacher is in class teaching, because the stories are so interesting, I'll go down, you know, like, to continue reading. Yeah. All through high school, books, I will say, are the only thing that made me survive high school as well. So books are not, they're not apart from me. I always say books are me, and books, and you know, like, I always carry them in my heart and inside of me. But I, you know, like, finished school, get jobs. So I got a job, worked with an NGO, left. I didn't feel fulfilled. After that, I got employed by my county government, you know, what you call permanent and pensionable, the dream of every, perhaps, I don't know, but maybe most people, especially when people...
for another day.
But I still left because I knew something was off. Like, I could not tell exactly what it was, but I felt like this is not meant for me. I will wake up, go to office. There are no major jobs to be done. Go. There's always tea waiting for you, a few things here and there for the day, and then that's it, and a salary. But I felt that didn't fulfill me. So I also left that. Immediately when I left that, I started, that was when I left that was 2015 August. Got married, had my first child in 2016 May, and then of course with motherhood I couldn't do much, so I was 100% involved in raising her for the first 2 years of her life. And so in 2017, just before she turned 2, I don't know whether you could recall, while we were at the launch, Gabriel Dinda, the CEO of Writers Guild, which is my publisher, had said, we met with Sahara sometime in August of 2017, and I told him it was 27th. The reason why I recall it vividly is because a friend, before that day, on the 25th, a friend reached out to me on Facebook and sent me an inbox message and said, you know, you write so well. You know, like, are you a writer? Are you published? And at that time, it was just me sharing my musings, my day, you know, like, perhaps I'm in a matatu and I observe something and then I write about it. Like, just stories here and there, but nothing of significance. So when that guy said that to me, it kind of felt like, oh, actually people are reading me and thinking I'm a writer. Deep down, I have the desire to be, but I just don't know where to start. So he tells me there's this group called Writers Guild Kenya. They meet every Friday at the National Museum. Perhaps you could be interested. So I asked him, okay, what time? He said from 2 p.m. And then I tell him, is there any contact you can give me? He said, yeah, I'll actually send you Gabriel's contact. So immediately I call Gabriel. So Gabriel picks up, a very lovely human being, very kind human being. He picks up and is like, we will be glad to host you, come. So the next day now, on the 27th, I go to the National Museum where they used to have a writer's ecclesia. It still happens up to date, every Friday, 2 p.m. to 5 p.m. So I go there, find this lovely gentleman smiling, you know, like welcoming me. So I was like, if this is a writer's group, I'm definitely sold in. Because I could feel his kindness even from afar, you know, like, that's how my writing journey began. That's how I found myself. I immediately signed up as a member. Will attend all the writing workshops, all the writing, you know, like ecclesias, and because I felt like finally this is something that fits me. This is something that I come in and I feel like it's not taking away the person I am. You know, I felt fulfilled. Still, I will dangle, you know, like, I'm not sure of what exactly I want to do. I'm not sure I wasn't sure I owned the title writer yet, but I felt like, you know, at least I belong to a writer's body, at least I submit something, I write a blog, so I'm like, it feels closer home. So 2018, 2019, somehow I also went back to work because, you know, bills have to be paid. So I found myself traveling to far off places. My writing wasn't as you know, like, as constant as it needed to be, consistent, I mean, as it needed to be. And came 2020 with COVID. Just actually a month before COVID is when I wrote Arawelo and published.
Oh, wow.
So when I was writing Arawelo, I was like, I want to do something that my daughter can read and see herself in this amazing, you know, like for what she is, for the strong person she is. And around that time, I had also started a literacy program, which I still run up to date in Mandera, which is my home county. It's called Northern Voice Trust. I was taking books and actually asking for book donations from my friends and on social media and taking it back to those kids back at home. And before that same February, when I was publishing this book, I wanted to do a book festival. For the first time, I think for the first time in the history of that entire town, we did a book festival. So while asking for books from people, I would, you know, like I have monetary needs that I need to ask help with, but I just didn't know how. So I was like, you know what, I think this story that I've always been postponing, it's time for me to write. It's rather okay for me to beg with a book and ask people to buy the book to help me than just go to people empty-handed and ask for help. So I actually wrote it in less than 1 week. I sat down and, you know, like just wrote the story, shared with an editor, went through it. She said, you know, correct A, B, I think we're good to go. And before long, the story was published. And that's how I was able to have my first book out. In so many amazing ways, you know, like I'm doing this thing for the community, but I needed help that I didn't know how to ask for, and it took my writing to now take me to the next level.
That was so phenomenal. Guys, you wrote a book in 1 week. I don't know whether you've heard that part. Anyway, so Arawelo comes out, you go do your book festival, you raise some money, and then what happens? This is 2017 or 18?
No, 2020.
2020.
Yeah.
Okay.
So Arawelo is out, travels to the world more than I think I will ever do.
Wow. That's nice.
People really, you know, like there was a good reception to it, and it grew wings. So
let me just stop you. This is Mandera, and this is women empowerment, and this is she comes from a Muslim community. Okay, let me just tell you a little bit of the story. I really liked the fact that there was a Qadi. I was seated next to a Qadi, and she said she goes to the Qadi for advice before she publishes. What? I was like, you don't want to be controversial, or you don't want to break rules, or you don't want to.
Yeah, for sure. Especially for short stories. I think the thing that I didn't mention is that I also published several short stories that are part of an anthology, and my short stories somehow come off as so much of controversial, especially to my community. So it's important for me to, because I again respect this is a community I belong to. I just want to highlight the issues happening within us that people don't talk about, you know, to bring them to the light of the day. So that's why I always have to go and consult with him and, you know, like know that what I'm writing is good and okay. Yeah, because I always say I don't live in an island. I'm part of this community. So if I don't want to be misunderstood or maybe to annoy them,
So is your second baby here in 2020 or?
No. My second baby was, he was born in 2020, but end of 2020.
Okay.
So Salah also, I published just a month before I had my baby.
Okay.
So Arawelo is out, you know, and people are asking me, the story was good. When are you next going to write? You know, like, I will say maybe out of peer pressure is how I had to sit down and write the second book, because everyone is like, you know, when are you publishing next? My publisher himself is calling me, Sahara, why are you not sending stories? I know you always, because he knows my potential, and he always says, you have all these nice stories. Why are you not writing? You know, send them. And at that time, of course, I was heavily pregnant, you know, like going through my own personal issues in life. But then I somehow also always felt that nagging feeling of, I don't want to be an author of one children's book and you know, like go out of the limelight, to fade out or something. So I had to ask myself to sit down and to do this book. And so I was like, I just don't want to do any book. I just don't want I always say and believe anybody can sit down and write any story. But I want my stories to be stories of significance and stories that really help, maybe change a narrative, maybe create awareness on something. So that's why I thought of Teacher Salah immediately, and I was like, you know what, I'm actually going to honor him with this book. That's how I wrote Salah. Come Salah, I became a mother. My second baby came, and we were good up until around 6 months, and like mostly around 5 months and 6 months is when people went to babies, like to help the baby sit on their own, like to train so that they're able to sit on their own. And my son couldn't. For some reason, he could never. So I said, maybe kids are different. Let me just let him be. So 6 months, 7 months, 8 months, I think 9 months is when he was like really at first learning how to sit, like, and that's with aided, like I really have to hold him, help him, otherwise he will fall. Of course, there's always that motherly instinct that tells you that something could be wrong, but somehow you never really have the courage to accept. So the moment that thought crosses your mind, you like really shake off your head to just, no, I can't entertain that. My son is okay, my child is okay, and I think, like we just really have to navigate this. And I've never thought of going to a doctor, like before even you ask, like I thought everything is okay with my child.
But you went for all your clinics?
We went for all the clinics. They will observe him, and like there was nothing apparently wrong with him, or maybe so shoutingly wrong with him. When he was born with the right eye slightly smaller than the left eye was slightly smaller than the right eye, and the one was blinking too much, the other one wasn't blinking at all. But somehow it didn't really raise, like it wasn't such of a red flag. I was like, maybe, even the nurse told me, maybe daktari alimwingiza mikono kwa macho or something. So it wasn't like something to really cause an alarm. 9 months gone, 12 months, and that's when he turned 1 year is when he was learning to sit unaided now. And then the month after he turned, now when he's 13 months old, at that time I used to live in Mombasa, so we relocated, came here. We met a friend for dinner. So that friend asked me, Sahara, is your child okay? Like, is your son okay? I'm like, yeah, sure, he's okay. What do you mean by is he okay? So he says, is he a normal child, like 100% normal? I started getting defensive. So I'm like, yeah, sure, he's okay. He said, no, I'm just asking because for a child his age, he's too calm. And at the same time, his head also slightly looks smaller for his age. So, that was just a concern. But then that's it. So I'm like, okay, yeah, he's okay, he's nice. Has he been checked by the doctors? Yeah, sure. All the doctors had a look at him, he's good. And I even hurriedly went through the dinner, and at the end of it all, I just wanted to be back to my house and not be bothered by questions. But that question, for some reason, it made me not have a sleep at night. The entire night I was up. I remember calling my friend. The first thing I did in the morning was call her, and I asked her, like, is there something wrong with my son? And she's like, why do you ask? And I tell her, I met this friend and he said, is your son okay? Like, you've known him since he was born. Is there something you can say is abnormal with him? My child is normal, is okay. I think it was just my motherly instinct trying to fight back and not accept, because somehow as a society we've just grown up to know these things belong to someone else. They can never be me. Yeah, they can never be me. And when it faces you, when it comes to you, like slaps you so hard on the face, you're not ready to accept, especially not willingly. You must always fight, resist. So, but good thing that question led me to the pediatric. The next day I woke up and I was like, you know what? Let me settle this once for all. Because I've always had that question. I've always felt that nagging feeling that something could be off, but I don't know how to do it.
So wait a minute. You're still going for your clinics. For us, we go for clinics 1 year. At least there's those weight checks. Apart from the vaccination.
Yeah, okay.
There's just the usual weight. You just go for weight.
Yeah.
And you go back home.
Yeah,
you used to go for those ones.
Yeah,
and everything was okay. The weight checks. Okay.
Yeah,
so the sisters are not asking you questions.
Nothing whatsoever. Okay. He's just a calm child. Like even if when he's not angry, or I mean when he's not hungry, he's just calm. So everybody will say, like that phrase of, he's just a cool child. So nothing. And then the match you will spend with those nurses is 5 minutes at most. And all they do is focus. And all they do is focus on the weight and height, and then that's all. Mtoto ana feed vizuri, and then that's it. Yes, and you leave. So perhaps that's why maybe they've never had something to raise.
Yeah.
Anyway, so we go to the pediatric, and I walk in. He says, "What's the problem?" I tell him, "Nothing. I just came to have my son checked." He tells me, "Put him there." I put him on a table to sit, and he observes him for a quick 15 minutes and tells me, "Something is definitely not right with this child. I cannot tell what exactly it is by just looking at him. I will suggest that we do some brain tests on him, and we'll see how to head and what to do from there." And I felt like the whole world crumbled in my shoulders, because I actually cried like while seated there, and I think for a minute he was confused or something, because it's like, why? Like, I didn't say your child is dying, like why are you breaking down? And now that I reflect back, I actually think my motherly instincts knew that something was off.
That was
but I couldn't really know how to, like to accept that or to put words into it. So he tells me, "Mommy, you just stand up, go home, but make sure you come back, we do those tests as soon as possible." So I tell him, okay. So we come home. I somehow managed to convince myself that nothing is wrong with my son, he's okay, he's cool. So I said, I'll take, because again, those tests are not easy and also not cheap. It comes with a lot of cost. And I didn't have any money lying around, so I was like, you know what, I'll budget this month, maybe towards the end, I'll have done the tests. And so I think life goes on normal for me. 2 days after the doctor visit, my son comes down with a seizure. I think the first one occurred at night while we were asleep with him, because he usually sleeps on the same bed with me. I felt like, some sound I can't even put words into. And I was like, what's wrong with this child? So I woke up, find him sweating so previously, and I'm like, what? So I pick him, I remove some of the clothes he was wearing, and I was thinking, maybe it's because he has coming down with fever or something. Kumbe he had a convulsion, and he was actually regaining his conscious back. It's just that I didn't know. So I just hold him for a while, then put him to sleep. He immediately falls asleep and goes. So the next morning, in the morning, he wakes up, very normal child, very okay. I go make them breakfast, feed him, and then went to the kitchen to now, deal with the daily chores. And then his sister calls me. She says, Mommy, come look at Hanet. There's usually somewhere he plays. And I found him convulsing again. So I'm like, why is this child vibrating? Like, what's wrong with him? I go to him and, he's just like this. The eyes are all gone up. It's like, my goodness, what's this? So I pick him. I don't know what to do with him. Mara namchukua. I take him back to the, to the mattress. I was so confused. But then that happened for like 5 to 6 minutes. And then immediately he fell asleep. So I put him to sleep, and still weirdly, you will think I'll run down the stairs and go to the doctor.
That's not
but somehow I was
you go back to the kitchen.
I went back to the kitchen to continue doing what I was doing. See, I had him so nicely, and that was around 9 in the morning. At around 11, same thing happens to him. That one now was just like, you know what, this is it. Yeah. 2 hours later. So I said, now this is it. So I picked him and went to the doctor, went to the same pediatric. So immediately we come in, he says, what happened? I tell him this child has convulsed, and how many times? 3 times. Since when? At an interval of when? I explain everything to him. He says, you're getting admitted. Take this child to the hospital, admit him. He's immediately being put on drugs, and we'll do the tests as soon as possible. Let me get the doctors online. That was around now midday, so he could not manage to get the doctors, so we scheduled for the next morning, but he was immediately put on drugs, and we were admitted at the hospital. We stayed there with him for a week, for 7 days, while being monitored, because what I didn't know is that every seizure affects the brain cells. I'm just thinking it's a very big deal. So for me, I was just like, I've never in my entire life seen anyone convulse. I've seen maybe in high school people faint, but I've never. And when it's so close home, when it's your child, somehow you actually just don't believe it. So it was hard. I don't know what I can even tell. I was crying day and night. but then God saw us through. We went out of the hospital. He was put on drugs.
At the hospital, are they taking the test, the ones the pediatrician asked
Yeah,
you to
the
do?
MRI test. Yes,
They
we
did them.
did. Yeah, and so when the result came out, he told me something is not okay with him, but it's something, you know, like it's manageable. I mean, he will be on drugs for this long, and then after that, we will have to do another test to see if the brain self-corrected or not. The good thing is that, this is what is assuring to me, is that the kid is still growing, he's still young. Of course, they may never outgrow this condition, but the thing is that somehow the brain can always rewire itself. So that gives me hope.
That's the time you found out. By the time you're going home after the 7 days, being discharged.
Yeah.
You've been told.
Yeah.
You've been told the condition.
Yeah.
Fully informed. Have you been given any form of education, information, training?
Nothing, no education, no training, but you just told this is, you know, like for him, it's the right side of the brain is not functioning as it should.
That's what the doctor said.
Yeah, and the focal point of the brain as well has a slow, I don't know, there's something they call an EEG test that takes the frequency at which the brain is ought to function normally, and his is not, you know, like functioning as it should, as it ought to. And so he told me he'll be on drugs that will help to, first of all, manage the seizures so that he doesn't have to have any more seizures. And then now after that, he'll be monitored. We go for therapy, we go for, you know, like occupational therapy, that is, so that he's helped to, you know, like be on the normal or whatever side they call, like to manage this condition, to manage this situation. But for you to even come around and accept that, you know what, this is it, and accept even to go for those therapies, I think it needs a lot of
When you went back home, what did you do?
I went to a second and a third and a fourth doctor.
Oh Lord.
Because I was like, maybe this doctor is just a general pediatric. He doesn't know what he's saying. So now let me go to a neurologist. Carried my MRI test and everything with me, went to the neurologist, confirmed what the first doctor said, and told me to continue with the dose as he told me, and to continue with the occupational therapy. Somehow I wasn't still convinced. I was like, you know what, maybe there's somebody else who will, I don't know, maybe I was just looking for consolation that your child is normal or your child is okay, you know, like, because at that time I didn't know that they're still okay, whether or not they have a colorful brain or a condition. So I went to a second neurologist, a third neurologist, and even a fourth neurologist, but now who is a developmental neurologist. And all of them confirmed that, you know what, this child actually needs to be on therapy and needs to be reviewed every month, and you need to be on this drug. So yeah, I think it just dawned on me. But it's something that also, it's not apparent. You just don't wake up and say, this is it, I'm going to accept and brace, and you know, it just creeps on you. Because you know, the more you sit, the more your child is getting to get affected. So you just somehow just brave yourself and say, you know what, if it takes that occupational therapist for my child to be okay, I'm going to do it. I'm going to go out of my way and attend all of them. And do everything needed to be able to afford them as well, because they don't come cheap, you know.
So are you comfortable to comment on, we talked about, I'm looking at your support system. So are you comfortable to talk about that? At the time, who's your support system? Who are you going to run into? Who are you picking these referrals from? Because trust me, no one has 4 neurologists in their phone books. No one has all those people in their phone books, you know.
For sure.
Like on call. So who are you absorbing these stories with or information with?
The first time when the first time when I got the diagnosis, I called. I have a number of friends, and especially sisters who, you know, like not blood sisters, but sisters life gifted me, and we have this WhatsApp group. I remember when I told one of them while I was still at the hospital, I called one and I was like, "My God, my child is sick. I'm in the hospital," you know, like, and she was conversing with me, talking to me for hours and telling me, you don't have to worry, you know, like you're going to be okay, it's going to be okay. And she relayed the information to the WhatsApp group. And in the WhatsApp group, there were two moms who had, one had an autistic child, and another one had a child with cerebral palsy. And both of them took me in as their sister. They introduced me to these special needs moms groups. They shared my story of, you know, like, oh my God, Sahara has her child has come down with this condition. You know, could we give her the support she needs? You know, all of them calling me. Some even going out of their way to actually pay for our sessions. Yeah, so I can say God has gifted me so many wonderful, amazing people along the way, and that I always go back to, run to, you know, whenever I'm in need of anything. So yeah, I have all the support I think I can say, and especially emotionally, you know, like having people being there for you to speak your mind, to speak what you're feeling. I think I always say, and this month being the mental health month, this is something I always reflect back to. I think at any given time, any human being needs love and support. Sure. And that love and support is just a phone call, somebody sitting through to listen to you for 1 hour, somebody saying, you know what, I got this, I got you. Somebody walking for a distance to come and give you a hug or give you a pat on your shoulder. I think, yeah, that's sometimes that is the only help people need. And it's unfortunate that in this world, and especially in the digital era world we live in, some of us are so deprived of that, and that's why you find people, you know, like stressed, people depressed, and people committing suicide even, you know, and saying, you know, like they weren't maybe comfortable talking. I didn't have somebody to talk to. So talking is something we may overlook as something small or insignificant, but trust you me, one of the things I've learned along this journey is how much important it is to have that one person in your mind or in your life that you can always go back to, that you can always talk to.
The journey of you, did you blame yourself? Did you look for causes? Did you read about the condition? What happened? How did you process? Because you've educated us here in the book, and I really liked that, how you categorize them and all that. So yeah, paint for us that picture.
Okay, so yeah, when I accepted that, you know, my child needs help and started going to the therapy, I didn't even know what an occupational therapist is. All I knew is there's a therapist and, you know, like the mental health therapist, but I never knew there are categories of, there's speech therapy, language therapy, all this kind of new knowledge that you don't know, first of all, that is all, you know, like it's like a river that floods into you. And so I really had to educate myself, first of all. I read about therapy, read what is an occupational therapy, what do they do, what does it help with my child. Read about the different kinds of neurodiversity that exists, because when we speak about neurodiversity, it's usually an umbrella cluster. In it, there are so many conditions, different conditions. There are children who are on the spectrum, there are children who are not on the spectrum. So you have to really categorically learn all of this and to know so that when you have knowledge and when you are aware, of course, you will know better how to handle the situation. So yes, I did read a lot of material on special needs and especially on neurodiversity. I am still reading, and trust me, I don't think I am even halfway into knowing anything. It's just so much. So I read every day. I interact with material every day. I listen to people's experiences every day. You asked if I blamed myself or, you know, like, and I don't know, earlier on in your conversation, I don't know whether it was offline or I can't remember, but there's some time you mentioned how parents sometimes, because of the society, hide their kids and all that. Actually, the reason why parents hide their kids mostly is because it's just two reasons. One, it's the shame. You know, like you're made to feel like something is, you know, when your child has a special need, you're made to feel like he or she is less of a human, that they are less. So nobody wants to feel their kid is less. So that is the shame. That's where the shame gets in. You're shameful to show your child or to talk about your child because you don't want to be reminded or told that something is, you know, off with them, that they are less of a normal, they're less of, you know, like other children. The other reason is guilt. You're made to feel like you did something wrong, or something, a curse or bad luck has followed you, or, you know, like, and this is not here nor there. For sure, there's nothing called curse, there's nothing called, you know, like, even if you're the believer of believers in this world, these things just find anyone. And the other reason I have learned is, the other thing I mean, not reason I've learned is, no one is ever ready for it. Whether you're a president of a nation or whether you're just a nobody in the streets, this news hits you and you really don't know what to do. I've met people who are very accomplished in their careers, and they still say, I struggle to talk about my child. Where do you get the courage? How do you handle this? They come to me to ask, you know, like, because whatever they are, they have been made to feel like you're not enough, that you're less, or maybe there's a curse, you know, like, and so people go inwards and start blaming themselves and thinking, oh, maybe if I did A, or maybe I didn't do B. And I always tell mothers, these things, they will always be here. We found them, and maybe they will be here for the longest, but there's nothing wrong with you, there's nothing wrong with your child. It's just that their brain, and I always like to say, I think as a society, we always taught black and white, nothing in between. Perhaps maybe some gray, like, that's how we view the world, that's how we see. It's either you're this or this, there's nothing in between. And these kids come into our lives, they have this colorful brain, they do things their own way, without consulting you, without consulting anyone. Their brain functions differently. And so they teach you colors. That's how I came with the idea of the colorful brain. Because, you know, like, in a world where I know A and B, this child teaches me there is also a Z and a W and a V somewhere else that I may not have ever looked at. So they actually make, I always tend to think, they actually sent to our lives to make us better people and better humans. If only we open our eyes to it.
So how far are you in terms of, on the spectrum? You're okay, you and now the two kids, in terms of motherhood, in terms of absorbing, in terms of what you're doing, very good job. And you've already said you guys have a support group for moms with special needs. That's really nice. So how far are you?
To be honest, I don't think that's a question I can answer. No one can say I am this far or this. This is a journey. And in a journey, you make 100 steps forward and 500 steps back. It's just, you know, like, that's just how it is. There are days I wake up and it's very, very hard. I don't want to even talk to anyone. I don't want to, you know, like, it's just so hard on my soul. And I just find myself so emotional. There are days I wake up and I have the energy to even go out there and do advocacy, talk to mothers, talk to people, you know, like, it's just one step at a time, and nobody ever has it all together. Nobody has it, you know, like, has figured it all out, whether there's a mom who's been doing it 16 years or whether I'm a mom like me who's doing it for the last 8 months. Like, no one can say I have figured it out or I got it all. So it's a step. You wake up, you just go with the waves as they come. I'll show up.
If there's one thing, take out, parting shot, if there's one thing you would like someone to take out from this, from a lesson, what will it be? That
this can happen to anyone. Like, as a society, I think unless special needs knocks on our doors, we really don't take the time to learn about it. I don't think any of our society is ever ready for special needs at any given time. So I think what I will say is, I think we need to do better. We need to read. We need to go out there and meet people, to know, you know, like, people who've lived these experiences, just for the sake of yourself. Just learn about disability, learn about these conditions, learn about, you know, like, read about it, meet up these people, talk to them. I think that's the best I can say, and maybe tell everyone.
Thank you. Thank you, Sahara. Gosh, I'm so honored to have had you here and for you to tell your story. Guys, go and disturb Sahara Abdi on her Facebook page. She writes her posts are so nice. Go and order the book from her Facebook page. Stress her there. She needs to sell them. Thank you so much for listening to us. Kindly comment and you know, tell us about what you think and what we should do more better. Have a good one.